Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Show on the Gruely Truth Sports Network. The NFL Show is brought to you by Replenishing Care and Technologies. Make sure you check them out at rcandt.com, especially the PEMF machine. I'm your co-host for the NFL Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my other co-host, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. How about you?
All right, and our special guest today did not get the memo about everybody wearing orange on Thursday. Help me welcome to the show, Sam McGinnis.
How you doing? I'm ready to go.
Is that a throwback shirt? Since it's a Red Wing shirt, it says
Stanley Cup. 2008.
2008. Do they make shirts that old? All right. Today we're going to discuss what may be the best division, top to bottom, in the NFL this upcoming season in the NFC West. And you could argue that the NFC West is football's best division. It includes the conference's past two champions, San Francisco and LA. Seattle is led by an MVP frontrunner who has already won a ring, and Arizona has the reigning offensive rookie of the year. For the Niners, the competition from within the division will make the climb back to the Super Bowl all the more steep. And I think when we look at the 49ers, a pessimist could point out that San Francisco depended on narrow escapes last year with 5 of its wins by 5 points or fewer. But an optimist would counter that the team's 4 losses were a 3-pointer in Baltimore that turned on a failed 4th and inches attempt, an overtime defeat to Seattle that could have been avoided if a fill-in kicker had made a 47-yard kick, a defeat on the final play from scrimmage against a red-hot Atlanta team, and, of course, the Super Bowl collapse, up 10 with 7 minutes left. So when we start off, we'll start off at the top. We'll go with the 49ers, coached by Kyle Shanahan. Their defense is led by second year in Nick Bosa, and you have to assume, Sam Teets, that the defense will only get better. But the major question here is on offense with quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, I do have major questions for Garoppolo. I know you liked him towards the end of last year. I
always liked him. I just didn't like him at the end of last year because I think Kyle Shanahan kind of put shackles on him.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to see if Shanahan opens it up to start the year and see if that changes a little bit of what happened towards the end of last season. But I personally am not a huge Jimmy Garoppolo guy. I think he's a top 16, top 15 quarterback in the NFL at most. I don't love his game. I don't love the upside he brings to the table. And I do not love the San Francisco 49ers offense this year. Without Emmanuel Sanders, I think they don't have enough receiving threats. I know they have George Kittle, which is, of course, a huge plus. But outside of their running game, I don't see where their extra threats are going to come in the pass attack.
All right, San Francisco 49ers, McGinnis, what do you think? Can they win this division again?
I think they will. Maybe at 11-5 though, instead of 13-3.
Is that all you got, Sam?
Well, as you mentioned, they lost Emmanuel Sanders. I think, especially if you come off of a Super Bowl win, you might not be as competitive the next season, and I think we've seen that at least with not repeating Super Bowls. So I think that could potentially also have an effect on it. I still see them winning the division, though. Within the division, though, their games against other teams in the division are going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think the worst-case scenario to me, Teets, is this. I think injuries could test the team's depth, and you got to worry about whether age catches up to cornerback Richard Sherman, who had a great season last year, and left tackle Trent Williams, who they just added, who has not played a lot of football in the past year or two.
Oh, yeah, and those are 2 of their arguably top 5 players on their team. They really don't have a star in the secondary outside of Sherman, so you need him to play healthy. And as for Trent Williams, we had Joe Staley at left tackle spot last year, and I know he was getting older, but it was still very consistent play. So you replace him with Trent Williams, you're expecting a lot from Trent. And if he doesn't come out and deliver, and then your offensive line suddenly, the pass blocking's not there anymore. So I think there's a lot of holes here that if you have injuries, you're not going to be able to plug and play necessarily on the offensive line. And to be honest, I'm a little concerned even on the defensive interior. You got Javon Kinlaw and maybe you move Solomon Thomas inside. I don't know what you're going to do there. But even if you lose a defensive tackle, I think you could be having some trouble stopping the run on the interior.
Yeah, and when we transition and look at the team that won and was in this position last year as Super Bowl losers, the Los Angeles Rams, they would have made the postseason last year under 2020's new 14-team playoffs, or they would have made it if Greg Zuerlein would have hit a 44-yarder in Week 5 loss at Seattle. But while their NFC title defense fell flat, I don't think the year was a total loss. A young offensive line kind of came into its own later on, and after a shaky first 2/3 of the season, Jared McGough and Sean McVay kind of found their groove, averaging 29 points over the final 5 games. You've got a first-year coordinator in Brandon Staley. You've got elite stars in Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald. So is this the year the Rams maybe make it back to the playoffs, Sam McGinnis?
I don't know. This is more of a gut feeling than anything with me, but the trend last year that I saw, at least when you look at earlier in the year versus later in the year, it was a little disturbing. They felt just the gut feeling there for me is lesser so. I'm seeing somewhere between 7-9 and 9-7. They could make it back to the playoffs, and especially under the new 14 rule, but I don't know. Just a gut feeling thing there for me.
Well, and I think my worst case scenario here is Sam Teets. Golf has another up and down season, and it doesn't matter how good the plays called are if you have that. And I think the bigger problem is the defense to change coordinators that is relying on a new group of linebackers.
Yeah, I think the low for this team is honestly 5 or 6 wins. I disagree with you in terms of last season. I think last season was a total failure. I think there was nothing good that came out of last season at all. I think you scapegoated Wade Phillips a little bit at the defensive coordinator position because you did not give him defensive personnel to succeed, especially at the linebacker level and also along defensive line at times. I think you lose Corey Littleton in the middle. That's a huge loss. You lose Dante Fowler Jr. You've lost so much. Eric Weddle in the secondary, he retired. I think they've lost too many players to have a relevant defense this year. The offensive line is still mediocre at best, in my opinion. I don't think we have a proven running game. Even though I love Cam Akers, I don't think they have a proven running back right now. And Jared Goff has been so flip-floppity. I do not believe in the Rams at all. I think they'll finish last in this division with 5 or 6 wins.
Now, we'll get to that in a minute. You're not supposed to give predictions early on because now Rams fans will turn it off and say these guys are idiots. When I look at the Rams, the thing that scares me is when McVay first got the job, the first thing he did was he went out and he got Wade Phillips because he wanted an experienced defensive coordinator, somebody that had head coaching experience. Now they kind of threw Wade Phillips under the bus. After a great year 2 years ago, the talent level wasn't as good last year, and I don't see how the defense is going to be better by eliminating Wade Phillips from this coaching staff, Sam.
No, I think it's going to be worse. And I know you might be directing me that, McGinnis, but I think it's going to be.
I was directing it at you.
I think it's going to be a worse situation. I just don't see how they're going to go out there and compete. Like I said, I think losing Corey Littleton, that's one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. You don't just replace him with who they have. And also losing Dante Fowler Jr., who replacing him with Leonard Floyd, who was an absolute bust in Chicago. So to me, this is not a fantastic defense. There's no depth on this defense at all, except for maybe at safety. And so I don't have any faith in the new defensive coordinator or this defense to come out and even play at an average level.
All right, Sam McGinnis, what's your take on the Rams?
Well, I think when you look at it, it may have been more of a one-year wonder thing. People sometimes like to draw attention to teams when they've had a great year or an individual when they've had a great year. I think you have to take it over time. And I think this team is going to have a harder time as we move on. And I think we saw that last year. And I think it's quite possible we could continue to see that this year. Just because they had one good year does not automatically make them the greatest thing ever.
Well, it made Sean McVay the greatest thing ever for a while, but I think that Sean McVay will be looking for a new job shortly. I think they are a 4 to 7 win team. I think they're last in this division also. And meanwhile, while all this goes on, Seattle keeps finding ways to win. 2 years ago, they returned to a run-heavy offense with Russell Wilson sprinkling in big throws off play action. They don't pile up points, but the formula allows them to hang around week after week. And last season, they were 11-3 in one-possession games, and that's because, in my opinion, Russell Wilson is the best quarterback in the NFL. Now, they did acquire Jamal Adams, which will help the defense. I think they gave up too much for him in that trade with the Jets. But they didn't really address their lack of traditional pass rushers, which I think is going to come back to bite them in the butt. And turnovers are typically created by pressure. That's why it's hard for me to envision Sam Teets, Seattle duplicating last year's 32 takeaways. 16 of those were fumble recoveries over the league's first 12 games. And I just think we had this discussion, I think, last year where my point was the Bears wouldn't be as good. And it wasn't because necessarily Mitch Trubisky. It's just the fact that it's hard to get back-to-back years where you're getting 30 or 40-plus turnovers. And when I look at this, I don't see a defense able to create that many turnovers, but I do see an offense that is capable of scoring more points to make up for that difference.
Yeah, and the offense will come through in the clutch. That's really what you have with Seattle. You just have to keep the score close. If it's a one-score game by the fourth quarter, I'm putting my money generally on Seattle to come out and win the game. But you're right, defensively, they have a lot of issues up front. That defensive line is just even more problematic than it was last year. I mean, you got L.J. Collier coming into his second season. He did absolutely nothing as a rookie. They're kind of relying on him to perform well. Jaron Reed was a total bust last year after performing well in 2018. You did bring in Bruce Irvin, who had a career high in sacks this past season, but he's really not a star pass rusher in any way. They drafted Darrell Taylor and Alton Robinson to play defensive end, but I don't really have any faith in those guys either. So I think they have improved at the linebacker level. They've improved in the secondary. That defensive line, though, I just can't buy it.
All right, Sam McGinnis.
Yeah, I think at least from the perspective of the offense, I trust Russell Wilson and I trust the offense to get things done. You'll notice in the games that they played, specifically against the 49ers, late they were very good. I think he can come in the clutch when it's needed. So again, as Sam Teets said, as long as they keep the score close, they've got a chance in every game they play.
Yeah, and you've also got Bobby Wagner, one of the best linebackers in football. I think this is probably still a playoff team. I don't know if they can win the division, but, I mean, as long as you got Russell Wilson, you definitely have a shot to do something here. And now when we look at the Cardinals, usually they're the last one we bring up. We wouldn't say much because there's not much to say, but they're a popular breakout candidate, much like the Cleveland Browns were last year at this time. Colin Murray coming off an impressive rookie year in Cliff Kingsbury's air raid offense. Murray's biggest flaw was on intermediate level passes. He had a league low 47.2% completion percentage on throws that traveled 11 to 20 yards. Is the height problem maybe limiting his vision downfield, or were his receivers not open? If the latter was true, the acquisition of All-Pro DeAndre Hopkins from the Texans will serve as an instant remedy for that, Sam Teets. And when I look at this, I think the Cardinals are I think they're a great dark horse to make a run at this division.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go as high as to win the division. I would probably give them maybe the last spot in the playoffs, though. It really comes down to what Kyler Murray does in his second season. We've seen sometimes quarterbacks regress in their second years, had not really followed through. I know there's a contingent of people who actually think Kyler Murray could win the MVP this year. I'm not on board with that at all. I think that's an extreme overestimation. But I think Kyler Murray is good enough to go out there and win 9 games. And I think this team, offensively, to some degree, is good enough to get to that point. Kyler Murray, luckily, he's a mobile quarterback because the offensive line is still terrible. I don't think the offensive line is good at all compared to some of the other teams we already talked about. And this is a little bit different for me than what the Cleveland had last year. Cleveland was almost all hype. To me, I think Arizona has some substance. Arizona has DeAndre Hopkins, who is better than Odell Beckham. They have Larry Fitzgerald, who's a proven leader. So they have people in place who can be leaders on this team and in this organization. And defensively, you add Isaiah Simmons and you have Chandler Jones, who's averaging 14.5 sacks for the past 5 years. I think there's substance here that there wasn't in Cleveland.
Well, see, I think a lot of that substance is just the fact that they're not Cleveland.
Yeah.
That's all you need to be.
The fact that
if you put this Cardinal roster in Cleveland, we would be sitting here saying, well, they're definitely not going to do anything. And I think that when I say that they have a chance to do something, it rides on the defense. I still think this is a 6 to 8 win team. I know I brought up at the start they might be the best division top to bottom. I don't think they are, really. I think it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. I don't think the Rams are very good. I think Seattle has holes. And the Arizona Cardinals, the problem is the defense was struggled to slow down opposing passing games last season. I think they're going to struggle to make stops again. So you also got a shortened offseason, which prevents Murray and Hopkins maybe from creating the chemistry you need really at the start of the season to be able to make a run at the division. When I look at this division, to me, the 49ers are hands down the best team. I think they'll be first. I think the Seahawks second, Cardinals third, Rams fourth. What do you think, Sam McGinnis?
I think it would be somewhere around there. This is pretty much the same thing. I might have the Cardinals at more of an 8-8, though. Seahawks around 9-7.
I said 7-9, Sam. There's not a big difference between 7-9 and 8-8.
Did I say 7-9?
You said 8-8. I said 7-9, and then you made it sound like that was completely different than 8-8.
No, it's not that far. Really, if you look at 7-9 to 9-7, I think that might be around the same area anyway. But
I think you can say that about all 3 of these teams that aren't named the 49ers.
Yeah, because I think it was a bit like yesterday, because it was it's really the top team being Kansas City, and then after that for me it was like
But I think the difference there is this: in the AFC West, I think that you really have to stretch to get the other three teams to 9 or 10 wins. Where I think in the NFC West, I don't think you have to stretch that much for any of them to just have a certain thing go right and they win 9 or 10 games. I think the teams in the NFC West are a lot more talented than the teams in the AFC West.
Well, and here's something I'll call now. From throughout the season, there's usually that one player we hear about a lot. Last year it was Lamar Jackson. The year before that it was it was Patrick Mahomes. I think this year it will be Kyler Murray. Whether he's the MVP or not, I don't know, but I think he'll definitely be someone we're hearing about as time goes on.
I don't know what Colin Murray's done at any point so far to show him he's going to be the MVP. I mean, last year wasn't that fantastic from Colin Murray. He was good, but he wasn't great.
How about this? I think it was fantastic when you consider the offensive line, the defense, and what he had around him. Because a lot of that stuff he had to create on his own. And I think the ability to create there, I mean, Russell Wilson's first season would have probably been about like that if he didn't have a great defense and a team that was that great around him. So I think when you look at what Kyler Murray was playing with around him, I think that it was a spectacular season for a rookie, because to put a rookie behind an offensive line is that bad and not really have much running game and not have much defense. I think that's a pretty damn good season, Sam.
Yeah, I can see your point there. I can agree with that. I don't buy into the MVP kind of hype. I don't see Kyler Murray as the top 10 quarterback this season. I just don't.
Rosen anyway.
Well, this is the thing. I think bottom of the top 10 maybe, but I'm thinking somewhere between 12 and 15 right now, which for a guy in his second year is pretty damn good. Anybody think that maybe Josh Gordon signing with the Seahawks yesterday changes anything, or today?
No, it doesn't change a lot to me because they already have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. I'm excited to see what DK Metcalf does. I don't think it'll be the breakout year everyone anticipates, but I can see him maybe taking over a little bit more as the lead role there. The Seahawks have a ton of tight ends already. I don't think Josh Gordon adds much besides a depth piece.
All right, and then, of course, who's the guy in Tampa Bay now? Leonard Fournette, one-year contract worth max value of $3.5 million. This Buccaneers offense, I mean, Ronald Jones isn't a bad running back, but he's not Leonard Fournette. And if Fournette's healthy, with the cast of guys they got at tight end, wide receiver, what they got on defense, I mean, we haven't talked about this division yet, but are the Bucs, I mean, we'll go to McGinnis because I know he doesn't believe this, but is Tampa Bay a true Super Bowl contender now?
I think that is possible, as much as that hurts me to say it. It's almost like Tom Brady joined the team and then everybody was like, oh, yes. And so I think it's kind of funny to watch that. It was like Tom Brady and then consecutively you watched one person after the next join that team.
But there's a reason for that, Sam, and the reason is Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback that ever lived.
And so clearly the players, at least if this is the reason they're coming, is because of Tom Brady. It's because they think he can do that. So I think they've definitely improved, and it was very interesting to watch Tom Brady and then just consecutively every other position. It's nuts.
Well, it's been like that in the past. I mean, Reggie White goes to Green Bay, then everybody else wants to go to Green Bay.
People like winning. It's fair.
Yeah, I mean, come on, right now. If you were a player in the NFL, Sam, what team would you want to go to? You want to go to
Tampa Bay.
You want to go to the team with the quarterback that's been to 9 Super Bowls in one season.
It's like, would you want during the Michael Jordan Bulls or the Patrick Ewing Knicks? Obviously, I'm going to the Bulls. I mean, it's not that hard. I'm going where the greatness is, and the greatness right now is in Tampa Bay with Tom Brady. They've got 2 All-Pro caliber receivers. They now got a backfield that features Leonard Fournette, rookie Keyshawn Vaughn, LaShawn McCoy, and Ronald Jones, who's not a terrible runner, just can't pass block. But other than that, he's pretty good.
And they've got 3 tight ends that are better than a lot of teams, any tight end they have.
Yeah, exactly. And then you got the offensive line is fairly good. The defensive front was the best in the league last year in terms of allowing rushing yards. So I don't see why people pick against Tampa Bay. It just doesn't make sense to pick against Tom Brady and that unit.
Well, the reason they pick against it is the reason McGinnis hopes they fail, because they're jealous of Tom Brady and his greatness.
Well, and here's another thing to consider. I believe Tampa Bay, maybe over the last 2 or 3 years, but I think last year maybe included, Tampa Bay did defeat the Saints at least one time, I think, with, what was it, Fitzpatrick. And now they've got a better team than that. So there's a potential that they could beat the Saints twice and actually take the division.
Well, they did it with Jameis Winston, I think, last year, wasn't it?
Jameis Winston. I thought they did it with, was it Fitzpatrick the year before?
They did it with Fitzpatrick 2 years ago in the Superdome, I think like week 1 or week 2, and then they did it again. And I think both wins were at the Superdome, wasn't it, Sam Teets?
I know the first one was. The first one with Fitzpatrick in 2018 definitely was. I don't know about last year.
Well, I'm pretty sure it was. And both games were like 45-40 or something. So they just outscored. And when you look at this, Bruce Arians is a good football coach. And with the amount of talent there, I think with the addition of Leonard Fournette, when you look at this, how many positions would you say the Saints are better than the Buccaneers?
Not many. And you know what? I was getting chills when there was a report out the other day that Alvin Kamara, or the Saints might trade Alvin Kamara. Now they've gotten past that point, apparently. He's back at practice, but he wasn't there for a couple of days. He was unexcused absences. They're talking about trading him. I'm like, if they traded Alvin Kamara, it would have absolutely been given Tampa Bay the division pretty much. But to me, I think the Saints don't have many positions anymore. They're better. Maybe along the offensive line, they got a couple of all-pros there. But other than that, not many spots.
No. And I think it sets up, if everything was to go right for the NFL, Patrick Mahomes versus Tom Brady for the Super Bowl would be a pretty good ratings grabber.
Yeah. Oh, you definitely – and then you've got the young versus old thing. Yeah, I think that could be very helpful for the NFL.
Well, and then, of course, the only thing that would throw a wrench in it is when Joe Burrow throws 600 touchdown passes this year, the Bengals go into beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl.
Joe Burrow is screwed, regardless of whether he does well or not. He's on the Bengals. He's screwed.
Wait a second. Sam, you speak that like a Lions fan whose team's never been to the Super Bowl. The Bengals have been to the Super Bowl.
Just the same. Barry Sanders was screwed. It didn't matter that they even went to and won a playoff game. Calvin Johnson screwed. Matthew Stafford. It doesn't matter. There are just certain teams.
Once again, though, there are like 100 players that have played for the Bengals that have played in the Super Bowl for the Bengals. There's nobody that's ever been a Detroit Lion that has played in the Super Bowl. Hell, they've only made it to 53 years.
The Lions just retire early. That's the problem.
Well, the problem is the Lions aren't even really an NFL team, Sam. But
no, they're the best high school football team in the country.
I don't know. I think St. X or Elder could probably beat them down here in Cincinnati. They're better coached since Matt Patricia is there.
The misfortune of being born in Michigan for that reason.
Well, there's a lot of misfortunes to being born in Michigan, and probably the Lions and Red Wings are probably the least of the problems with being born in Michigan.
Well, okay, minus recent years, the Red Wings are actually a great reason. Okay,
the water can be an issue too, Sam. And the high crime rate, the murders. I mean, there's a lot of things there. I think the Detroit Lions probably fall somewhere down that list, way down.
The Detroit Lions are a mess, but actually the Red Wings minus the recent years have been pretty fantastic. 11 cups is pretty good.
Yeah, but unfortunately that was like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, the most recent one was 10 years ago.
That's over half your life, Dave Suck. Just so you know.
Yeah, that was over half my life.
And you're so young, you probably don't remember the first 8 years of your life when they were good.
I didn't even watch hockey until maybe 3 years ago. So
see, but yet you still wear the shirt. We got any other NFL?
How I have this actually.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the one thing that happened: the Patriots cut Mohamed Sanu. You remember they traded a second-round pick for him last year. They already got rid of him. I think it tells you a lot about New England. Just didn't hit with him. I think the Patriots. I don't really know what to expect from New England this year. I guess we'll cover that later on. But I think the Patriots are kind of getting rid of some of the old legs around there.
Well, I think the big problem with Mohamed Sanu is Mohamed Sanu's not really been. I mean, he was still good in Atlanta. He was good in Cincinnati, but I just don't think there's a lot left there. And people forget with wide receivers, most guys aren't Jerry Rice and played over 40 years old. And the shelf life on wide receivers and running backs is shorter than probably about any position in the NFL.
Yeah, he looked gassed last year. Like, honestly, once he got to New England, he didn't look like his usual self. I think all last year in general, I was surprised they traded a second rounder for him because he just didn't look normal.
Yeah, and you've got Joe Mixon, who signed a contract with the Bengals for another 4 years because he said he knows Joe Burrow's winning them at least 10 Super Bowls in the next decade. At least, maybe 11 in the next 10 years.
You might have a math problem there.
Now, you might have a math problem again. We don't have to have you back on here. Why don't you drink some water and be quiet? With your Detroit Red Wings shirt on.
I still don't know how I have this.
Come on, they let everybody in the playoffs in the NHL this year except for the Red Wings, right?
Yeah, heck, the Blackhawks, who were dead last in their division, made it to the playoffs.
And they won a series, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
There you
the
go.
Oilers cannot.
All right.
Connor McDavid needs to find himself a new team.
Nobody cares. It's the NFL show. Sam Teets, anything else?
Yeah, I think we just about covered it.
All right, guys. Tomorrow, you just want to do the NFC South since we started that way anyway?
Yeah, sure, why not?
All right. You going to join us, Sam?
See what I can do.
All right. So check us out tomorrow at 1 o'clock. You can hear all our podcasts on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify. Wherever you find podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. Check out our website, thegruelingtruth.com. Make sure you check out our presenting sponsor, Replenishing Care and Technologies at rcandt.com. You can follow Sam Teets at Sam Teets33. You can follow me at Grueling Truth. You can follow Sam McGinnis at
Samuel McG22.
All right, guys. So we're going to wrap it up. We will see everybody tomorrow at 1 o'clock when we discuss the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the New Orleans Saints, Carolina Panthers, and the Atlanta Falcons. So for now, for Sam McGinnis, Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.